Hey guys, welcome again to another Monday analysis. Every Monday we release a video about African economies and businesses as well, African business sectors, right? So today we have another great video. We're going to be talking about or discussing about the World Bank. A lot of people don't really know what this World Bank is doing, right? But most of the stuff you see, or most of the things you see in Africa, it can be a result of the World Bank. World Bank can be influencing your country politically, economically, but indirectly. You don't actually see them, but actually enforcing most of the stuff you see. So the history of World Bank was founded in 1944. The idea or the purpose was simply to finance Europe after the World War II. So basically, after World War II, the Europe was destroyed with the war, so they needed some money to rebuild their country. So the World Bank was created to finance Europe reconstructions, right? So now, in present day, the mission or the purpose has changed so much because the war is over and also the Europe has already been rebuilt. So what are they doing right now? The World Bank changed their missions to another thing, right? So you have to understand World Bank, you have to understand IMF first, right? So there's an IMF and the World Bank. So what is the difference between IMF and the World Bank? IMF exists to provide short-term loans. Usually they come as emergency loans or to kind of restructure the economy if the economy has a recession or a bump. Then the World Bank exists to provide long-term loans for a project like infrastructure, educations, healthcare, and more, right? So that's the big difference between them, and that's its role right now. But the World Bank mostly focus on the developing countries. They don't really provide loans for developed countries. So you have to understand that. But now we have to understand another thing, right? You have heard the story that Western loans comes with the conditions and Chinese loans comes with no condition, and that's why people are moving to Chinese loans. But to understand that, you have to understand what is the conditions is Western banks or World Bank asking those countries to follow to actually get the money. So the few conditions you have to understand is the main one is actually four of them, right? Democracy, market liberalization, and privatization, right? As well as some other social conditions that are usually going to come in. So number one, World Bank want to give loans to countries which are democratic countries. Well, this can be a myth because in the past, World Bank has given loans to countries which are authoritarian or dictatorship. So for me, on my own definitions, I would say that World Bank give the loans to the country with the leaders who are puppets to the United States or Europe, right? But you have to be a puppet to the United States first to actually get this money. Doesn't matter what your political system you have. Doesn't matter dictatorship, monarchy, or authoritarians. As soon as you're doing, you are puppet to them, they will give you the money. So the number two, which is actually very, very important and very dangerous, you need to look at is market liberalizations. So they say that for us to give you money, you have to be a free market economy, basically. So free market economy, basically, you have to open your country up. But this cannot actually be true because usually this, United States or Europe force African countries and Latin American countries to open up their market for United States product. They're basically giving you $3 billion for loan, for example. In exchange, you're going to open up your market, and then they're going to start bringing in some Coca-Cola and the other product from United States. What is the economic consequence of opening up your market and removing the import taxes on this product? Number one, U.S. product, they are heavily subsidized, right? They have a lot of subsidies in their countries, which means they can produce product cheaper than you can. Number two, U.S. financial market or credit market is really cheap, right? You can borrow money in America for 1% or 2%, even sometimes less than 1%, right? When you are a big company. So which means they have cheaper cost for acquiring capital that they can produce stuff cheaper. Whereby if you come in Africa, in a country like South Africa, Kenya, or Ghana, or Nigeria, to borrow money, you're going to pay 10, 20, 18%, right? So they're already ahead of you in terms of acquiring capital. So this means they can produce stuff cheaper than you can. So once you open your market and you remove all the protections for your local industry, they're going to flood your market with products from United States or Europe. So before you know, your local industry, they're not going to be able to compete. They're going to start going bankrupt and closing, and the job lost, right? So because you have to remember these products are made in the United States with American workers, not African workers. So when they come in your country and flood you with the product and they kill your local industry, your populations or your citizens lose jobs, right? So another third one you need to understand, probably you have seen this multiple times in a lot of African countries, and people ask themselves, why is it happening? Is it privatization? So privatizations is when the World Bank asks countries or governments to get to sell all the government-owned companies, right, or government-owned asset. So they will force you to sell government-owned asset because they say when the government runs asset, they run them bad, and as a result, you need to sell them so it can actually be a truly market economy. So most of these assets, because the government has owned them for a really, really long time, they're worth a lot of money. So what end up happening is the asset, local people are not going to be able to afford to buy those assets. So the government will end up selling this asset to the foreigner corporations, usually American and European. So basically, they will come, they will give you some money for loans, which you have to pay back. In exchange, they're going to rob your market. They're going to dump the product in your market, which you're going to make a lot of money. And number two, they're going to rob you your key strategic asset that the government owns. So for example, this you can look like a Ghana airport. Also, it can look like the sale of Kenya Airways, right? To this day, Kenya Airways is run, or the CEO of Kenya, I think, I may be mistaken, but maybe they have changed it, but it's a white man. So you can ask yourself, why does Kenya have a CEO who is a white man? Whereby you have over, probably 60% of people have no real job. They may have some hustle, but no real job. So number 4, which is the fourth one, is capitalism. So that means the World Bank, its role, which you have to understand this, the World Bank, IMF, WTO, all these organizations works together to push capitalist agenda, which means for them to give you any money, to give you any support or financial support, you have to sign World Trade Center organizations. World Trade Center agreements or WTO agreements, they usually force you to open up your market for foreign product. And usually the foreign product has an equal competition because they're coming from the United States with the heavy subsidies, or they have a better market, they can raise money faster, they can access loans, and the local company cannot access the same thing. So in the long term, they're going to kill your business. The main reason why Africa cannot feed itself actually is because WTO agreements on agriculture. This WTO agreement forced African countries to open up their market to companies like Cargill and other, U.S. companies to come and dump their product. You know what I mean? And what's going to happen if you don't sign this agreement? When you don't sign this agreement, they will threaten you by not giving you loan with IMF or the World Bank. So all these organizations, they're working together to basically, plan economic corruption in your country as long as you don't follow their rule. So number 2, you have to now to analyze. We have seen the condition they're going to give you. Now the next step is, what is the economic impact on your country? What's going to happen if the World Bank give you money and they enforce all these 4 conditions? So the economic impact, the first one is debt trap. We always know that United States always like to say that China is giving a debt trap to Africa, right? But the truth cannot be far from that, because the reality is America, the IMF and the World Bank has put Africa in debt trap for so many years. Most countries in Africa cannot even pay their debt. Most countries in Africa, they borrow their GDP, and then they collect tax, and then they pay the loans, and then they borrow the next year GDP again. So they cannot really get out this debt, right? The only way they can get out this debt is to get out the WTO, and also start actually investing money in their local industry. But they cannot do that because usually the World Bank money or IMF money comes with a condition of where and what you can do with it. And also they come with a condition of that you have to open up your market for the competitions, which are going to rob you the local industries and the jobs, right? So the debt trap has already been there. You can see this with Kenya. Right now, Kenya cannot pay its debt. They're enforcing taxes left and right to try and raise this money to pay the debt. And guess what's going to happen? As soon as they pay the debt, they're going to borrow the next money for the next GDP, for the next budget. So the number 2 is the sale of resources to the natural resources, to the multinationals, right? So if you look, actually simple Google search, right? You look at most of the countries in Africa with the natural resources, they're owned or controlled by Western corporations, multinationals. There's no country in Africa actually has a local company having the bigger share of the natural resource. So you can ask yourself, how is this happening and who's letting this happen? Guess what? It's the World Bank. The World Bank give you money and they force you to sell your government companies or state operating companies, and then who's going to afford to buy them? It's going to be the multinationals. And guess what's going to happen? The multinational will be collecting billions of dollars of your natural resource, and this money is going to be exported to American shareholder or European shareholder, and then there's going to be no money in a country. And that's how some of the countries now in Africa, like Congo, for example, 2021, they exported $8 billion worth of cobalt. But all this cobalt, all these $8 billion, none of this money actually stayed in the country because this money was exported by Glencore, which is a company based in Switzerland that is actually mining this cobalt. So all this money is moving outside the country, and that's why you don't see any reinvestment, in a country. So the third impact you have to understand, which is actually very severe, this will have impact to actually the local citizen, is the destruction of local industries. As soon as they flood your market with all this product, and this product are very produced on, with the economic of scale. They produce it with, subsidies. They produce it with the cheap money on the bank. They can be able to raise money from the stock market. They're able to sell product cheaper than you can. They're going to kill your local industry, and you're not going to be able to compete. And local business are going to start getting out of business, going bankrupt, and people are going to lose jobs. So they're going to totally destroy all the local businesses as long as they bring their own products inside. So number 4, which is actually the biggest consequence, is import dependence. You go to most African countries that are unable to produce their own products, so they become an import-dependent countries, where everything they eat, from food, toothpick, shoes, clothes, everything is imported from overseas by United States companies or Chinese companies or European companies, right? So all this is a consequence of the World Bank, IMF, WTO forcing this country to open up their market, and then having this multinational corporation coming in and flooding with their product and destroying the local industry to the point where you cannot produce anything. So now, what is the social impact of World Bank, right? What is the social impact? What is the cost of these loans? So the social impact, number 1, is lack of the funding of education, healthcare, and infrastructures, right? Even if they say they're going to give you money to fund your education and healthcare and infrastructures, it's actually impossible. You cannot do it. The reason why is this. If you live in a country like Kenya, whereby a government is spending 80% of its revenue to finance debt, basically they're spending 80% of all the revenue collected to pay debt. Now they only have 20% to finance education, healthcare, and infrastructure. What's going to happen? They're not going to have enough money to do it because they have to pay their government workers, they have to pay police, they have to fill up the police cars, they have to pay teachers, and all these people with just 20% of the whole entire government revenue. So they're going to see a lot of less funding for education, healthcare, and infrastructure. So number 2 is high taxes. As a citizen, you're going to see a lot of taxes hikes, right? Because the scenario is this. For you to get more money from the World Bank or IMF, your government has to demonstrate that it's able to collect taxes to pay these loans. So most African countries, they usually charge taxes, higher taxes from their citizens just to prove that they can pay these loans. So if the country has so much debt to its balance sheet, what's going to do is the easiest way and the most way government can get money is by raising tax. Guess what? Remember, they have already forced the government to sell its own companies which produce money. So now they'll have nowhere to get revenue except raising tax. So you're going to see a lot of stupid tax, get put on, like income tax, property tax, fuel tax, driving tax. All these taxes they're going to start putting on the citizens to be able to pay these loans. And the consequence is this tax is going to be passed through the products, and the product market is going to start getting very expensive. And the next thing you know, people have no money. Even the business cannot really accumulate any capital to reinvest because government is taking all the money. And then what's the result of this? The high cost of living. The life is going to really get expensive to live. You can't pay your rent. You can't buy your food. You can't live any decent life because every little money you're getting, you're giving to the government. Number 2, government also, if they don't have enough money in their budget, they're going to start borrowing money from the local economies, local banks. The next thing you're going to be competing with your government to get money from your local bank. So their life is going to really become very miserable for you to actually live in our country with World Bank loans. So we have demonstrated all these problems. You have social impact, economic impact, and all kind of stuff. So what is the actual solution to this matter? Because African countries have already walked so deep in this thing. They've already cut themselves to their bone, actually, with IMF and World Bank loans. So one of the solutions which was proposed years back was IDB, or African Development Bank. It was supposed to actually do the World Bank job by providing loans for infrastructure project, education, and healthcare. But things become so bad when African countries start selling equity or share to Americans, European, and Japan, and then they lose control of the entire bank. The only way they would have done this actually was very, very easy. They would have took Africa Development Bank and forced all the members of the bank to actually deposit some of their, let's say 10%, 20% of their reserve in a bank. Then those reserves will be used to finance project or intercontinental project on African continent, right? But everything went to shit. As you know, black people always fuck up everything. I mean, they fucked up that stuff, and now they send all their they sold out the bank to the foreigners, and now they can't even have enough money to do it. So they're still depending on the World Bank again. So the second solution is import tariff. African government can decide to add tariff on this or taxes, import taxes or import duties on these products coming from abroad. But as soon as you put those import duties, you're not going to get money from IMF. You're not going to get money from World Bank. So it's really a big gamble you're going to take, to actually put a tariff on this product. So my last solution, which I think is possible, is crypto. Africa need to move into cryptocurrency. The reason why cryptocurrency I think is a good solution is you are able to raise money very fast and very cheap with no strings attached to it. And then the people who bought the crypto, they can actually be able to generate or earn revenue or even succeed if your country succeeds. A country like, Tanzania or Congo or South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, they all have natural resources. They can really create their own currency or their own crypto coin and then back this crypto coin with its own commodity, with its own natural resources, right? And this will solve the problem that a lot of cryptocurrency have. They have product, but they have coin, but the coin has no utility, and the coin is backed by nothing, just basically like another fiat currency, right? So African countries, I think they need to start seriously looking into cryptocurrency as a way of raising money for their projects, and then back those projects by their natural resources or the real physical asset, and then they can actually solve the problem. So that's it, guys, for this Monday. And if you've been with me, I really appreciate for this. Make sure you go in our descriptions and click the link, join my Telegram groups, and also as well make sure you click subscribe and hit notification bell. We go live. We upload a video every Monday doing a different analysis for different institutions, countries, and businesses and companies, and that's where you may actually get some business opportunity in Africa. I'm out.